So I put this image as really representing myself when I'm fighting state and city agencies. But when I look around this room and I see all these faces that I know so well, I feel I'm not alone. Okay, so I'm going to sort of follow the same system that Heather did. So issues. So the first issue is related to the interrelationship among federal, state, and local agencies. So Heather's obviously talked a lot about USACE. I'm going to talk just briefly about a couple of others. So we have things like the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts that have direct impact on policies and regulations at the state and local levels. However, as we have just heard, the federal government is not always a shining star in climate action change, so states and localities have stepped up, particularly in areas of energy consumption, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. However, in the absence of federal mandates, state and cities often lack the financial resources to effectively implement these measures. So fundamentally, we need to think, educate, as Heather has said, and act on the last bullet point. This is, I think, really important. What level of government should bear primary responsibility for setting climate change policy? When are these best done at the local or state level, and when are they best done at the federal level? That, I think, is really important. The second issue relates to the need for landscape architects, as Heather has also said, to understand the roles and responsibilities of the state and local agencies. For example, in the planning category, the New York State Office of Emergency Management assists local governments to identify climate-related hazards, help assess loss prevention, and offers assistance in organizing emergency preparedness. Also in the planning category at the local level, the New York City Mayor's Office of Climate Resiliency leads policy development in climate resilience. The New York City Department of City Planning is a hybrid, which does engage in planning, such as the Waterfront Revitalization Program, but also requires formal approval for developments and open space along our coastlines. Regulatory agencies include DEP, this is city level, DEP, DOT, which both require formal approvals when doing construction. At the state level, Department of Environmental Conservation requires permits for work no matter what you do. Just look at the water and you need a permit. What we need to do as landscape architects is to use our funded, real projects to push the envelope on agency regulation to encourage more climate-positive action. Third issue, it is critical to understand the roles of state and city agencies and how they evaluate risks. This is a huge point that Heather was making. What are some of these criteria? So states, for example, tend to evaluate risk assessments based on the IPCC, related to sea level rise, storm intensity, heat wave frequencies. New York City tends to rely on NPCC. Both of these reports are updated roughly every 2 years, and they provide forecasts that array along a spectrum of global temperature rise from low to high. So how is a cost-benefit analysis performed? This again at the state and local level. First, an agency undertakes an analysis of hazards and risks using climate projections data, as I've just explained, as well as historic disaster data sets. Did you know those existed? I didn't. Then models are created to develop scenarios related to the severity of risk and financial loss, and then the agencies develop a portfolio of resiliency measures that can range from hard to soft solutions. The benefit side is calculated based on loss aversion by computing capital and operating costs to implement that measure. So, another very important point. How does an agency's physical assets influence their evaluation of risk? Both Martha in particular spoke about this morning. For example, DEP is responsible for delivering clean water and rapidly evacuating stormwater from our city. Together, this infrastructure is worth billions of dollars. So much of their regulatory function is based on ensuring continuity, whether it's good or bad, of this critical infrastructure, including the unfettered access to undertake repairs in the event of damage. What we need to do as landscape architects is to demonstrate that performative landscapes are a proactive measure to avert loss on investments and provide multiple other benefits. Unlike gray infrastructure that is single purpose, many green infrastructure solutions offer important co-benefits to the environment. So now, moving on to sort of solutions. As was said earlier today, there are only sort of solutions. I'm going to use these three projects, two are on rivers, one is inland, to highlight a few strategies that our firm has used to educate agencies and change policies. Just to point out something that somebody referred to earlier, so MNLA has been the prime consultant on all three of these projects, and it has been very much a collaborative effort among all of the team members to push these envelopes. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Hunts Point Landing in the South Bronx. It's on the East River Estuary, and the project is an outgrowth of a master plan for the Hunts Point community we did in 2008. The project involves demapping a street and building the first constructed intertidal and tidal wetlands in the South Bronx. Permits and approvals were needed from a host of agencies, as shown on the top of the screen. Now, one win here, was to persuade DEP to abandon the sewer and water lines running down the street to enable structures and landforms and an honest-to-God park be built within their otherwise required utility easements. When I actually did the math, and I went to DEP with a plan, between the water and sewer easements, that took up 70 feet of a 100-foot wide easement. So I said to them, what am I going to build here on 30 feet? So what we did is we persuaded them that we would just cap those utilities, and then the two properties that are north and south, or top and bottom of that image, could actually be serviced from Food Center Drive, shown on the left side of the image. So that was a huge win. We capped the utilities, we demapped the street, and we could build the park. This is the site before, a dead-end street with an undeveloped shoreline and no public access. The site was a brownfield due to its prior use as part of a coal gasification plant. Keep that in mind. So, success number 2 on this project was to persuade the state DEC to issue a BUD, or a beneficial use determination permit, to allow the project to use contaminated dredge, shown on the left, on a site as part of a landform to screen the adjacent parking lot, shown on the right. This saved the project more than $1 million in hauling and disposal fees, and kept the harmful material from honestly becoming somebody else's headache. Thereafter, the dredge was capped and cleaned fill and planted, as you see on the right. Why this is unusual is that BUDs, these permits, are obtained to move solid waste from a site to a collection facility. So this was unique in the fact that we kept kept the fill on site, and it was also contaminated. So this project took 6 years to complete. That's after the master plan. But it is really incredible to see the transformation on this community. And I think several people spoke today about the importance of thinking about people's lives in this conversation about climate change. And the project is now deeply embedded in the school systems of the South Bronx, as well as marine biology students from SUNY Stony Brook. So the message from this project is look for opportunities in the site constraints. Identify 4 to 5 opportunities that would advance climate resiliency measures, then meet with the agencies that have jurisdiction over your property, figure out which battles you have a chance of winning, and then use all of your ingenuity to circumvent, no, this can't be done. Second project, Pier 42. This is an 8-acre future park that began as a master plan 9 years ago, and it's finally going into construction now. The site is located on the Lower East Side, very close to numerous NYCHA housing projects which were badly impacted by Hurricane Sandy. The essence of the project is to create public access to the waterfront and implement soft shoreline, high berm, and sever a portion of the existing wharf from the bulkhead to provide more water perimeter experience as well as diverse habitat. This project touches every tier of agencies with multiple permits required from the same agency, shown on the top. So this is the site on the right. This is it a day after Sandy. On the left from the river when the shed was there. And on the bottom what it looks like today. We've removed the shed. We've kept just a certain portion of the structure for its use in the eventual park. So both Heather and I have been speaking about education as part and parcel of a landscape architect's role on high-performance, climate-resilient projects. Sections such as these help drive home the urgency and risks of flooding and sea level rise and are as effective educational tools for agencies as they are for community stakeholders. Even now, nearly 10 years after Sandy, New York City has not officially adopted a BFE, a base floor elevation, because of a whole host of political and economic factors too complicated to explain right now. The net result is that we as designers have to conduct our own benefit risk assessment and advise our clients of what elevation we should build to, particularly for structures with vulnerable systems like comfort stations in a flood zone. Achieving those elevations often, however, have significant design and budgetary implications that must also be evaluated. Oh, this was such a win. Noriko, are you here? Thank you, Noriko. But this was a tough fight. What we did was to obtain approval from DPR and DOT, who maintains park lighting, to use solar instead of hardwired light poles throughout the park. It seems like an absolute no-brainer. 7 years. That's why that's me on top of that rock up there feeling totally alone. We got testimonials from New York State and New Jersey agencies who have successfully used solar lights in public applications. We had the manufacturer talk with DOT operations. We piloted several projects for a year, on and on and on. At last, we prevailed. I actually even designed the solar lighting system for free. Lesson learned, be tenacious. Listen to agency concerns. Heather was more generous than me, I must say. Listen to agency concerns, find solutions to their resistance, keep persevering when you know what you are doing is right for climate resiliency. And with any luck, solar lights will be a park standard in flood-prone zones in the near future. Any people from the New York City Parks Department here? Okay, my last project. This one's an inland, because it's important. This is, again, a master plan. It started out as a master plan 11 years ago and has evolved now into us implementing a number of projects, including some that are still under construction. There are no federal agencies involved, but we did need approval from the Port Authority for two of the projects. And again, we needed multiple permits and approvals from several city agencies. The big lesson here is that by planning resiliency measures on a district-wide scale, we could implement smaller pieces incrementally with greater ease. The project is located in Hudson Square. It's north of Tribeca, west of Soho, south of Greenwich Village. The site is impacted by storm surge flooding and heavy rainfall, as well as the urban heat island effect. So it's a large district. The district sees an inordinate amount of traffic due to the presence of the Holland Tunnel, and the neighborhood's legacy as a manufacturing area has left it devoid of street trees. The 50,000 people, however, who work and go to school there are faced with grim streetscapes and very little open space. So over the past 8 years, in other words, once the master plan was approved, we then moved into implementing some projects. So over the past 8 years, we've been implementing a street tree planting program with permeable pavers between the pits. This has resulted in planting more than 390 trees that sequester carbon, reduce the urban heat island effect. We've now been able to measure this, 5 degrees, and captures 150,000 gallons per rainfall event to reduce the load on the CSOs and mitigate inland flooding. And it's interesting public-private partnership here. For the street trees, the Department of Parks and Recreation contributed money, as well as the bid. DOT granted a district-wide distinctive paving for this, and then the bid in turn maintains it. Enter the Port Authority. They control 2 acres of land around the Holland Tunnel, and in looking for ways to increase public open space, my eyes turned to these planted but inaccessible verges. After some negotiation with the port, we persuaded them to allow the BID, the Business Improvement District, to lease 3 of the 4 verges for public access, one of which is shown on the right. In addition to keeping the sites permeable, that was a good thing the port did, we added solar charging stations and various wellness-based programming. And I just want to say here, remember, resiliency is also about supporting people and their quality of life. And I thank Beth Meyer for so eloquently bringing that to the foreground this morning. So I will conclude with this last project in Hudson Square, Spring Street Park, a leftover half-acre traffic triangle with overlapping jurisdiction between DOT and DPR. Anybody else been in that boat? As part of the thank you, Robert Moses. As part of the redesign, we added a significant amount of permeable surface, upgraded existing tree pits, and added new street trees. Lights, by the way, are motion activated, and most of the furnishings have recycled content. Fine, blah, 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 we all do that. Lessons for landscape architects. Even small projects can make a big impact, and that is honestly how it is. I don't have constant depression. Especially when they're considered within a larger whole. And as I said at the outset, educating clients on a district-wide scale helps amplify the benefits of smaller, incrementally implemented projects and is thus more persuasive when calculating cost-benefit to both the clients and the agencies. And now I'm going to turn it over to Annette for the third piece of our puzzle.